Welcome to The Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the top reports from the global economy. Today's magazine. Hungary remains divided ahead of parliamentary elections. Ethiopia's supergrain TEF increasingly gets international attention. And Batya Sharabi joins us for a look at women in Japan. First, the headlines. All eyes are on the European Central Bank, which meets on Thursday after IMF Director Christine Lagarde suggested monetary easing. Lagarde said the bank should ease monetary policy to combat dangerously low inflation that could press Eurozone output and consumer spending. Unless countries come together to take the right kind of policy measures, we could be facing years of slow and subpar growth, she said. The fund releases its updated forecast for the global economy next Tuesday. In January, the IMF estimated 2014 growth of about 3.7%.
I believe that the global economy is turning the corner of the Great Recession. Hope. But I immediately said that growth remains too slow and too weak. In 2013, growth was about 3%. In 2013. In 2014, 2015, it will be more. So, positive, but certainly below past trends, and not the highest of the trends as we saw it before the crisis, just a regular trend.
China's leadership announced another stimulus package to help shore up sputtering growth in the world's #2 economy. The suggested stimulus will be smaller and more finely tuned than the massive spending following the 2008 financial crisis. Under the new measures, small businesses will get bigger tax breaks, social housing will be built to replace shantytowns, and railway construction will be sped up. To avoid the rapid growth in debt of the 2009 fiscal stimulus, Beijing is borrowing from the bond market. Bonds will be issued by the China Development Bank, which operates as an arm of the state. Amazon enters the video streaming market with the launch of Fire TV, a new set-top device to compete with rivals such as Apple and Roku. Analysts say the $99 video streaming device is part of the e-commerce giant's effort to bolster its retail traffic. Fire TV viewers may eventually be able to use the remote to buy a product in a commercial as Amazon's multimedia and online retail businesses become more integrated. But for now, the new Fire TV users will have to do with its limited platform of video streaming, television, and video games. A 3-day strike by pilots at Lufthansa over early retirement continued on Thursday, grounding Germany's largest airline. Lufthansa has canceled 3,800 flights during the strike, which runs until the end of Friday, and says the stoppage will cost it tens of millions of euros. The pilots demand 60% of their pay if they retire before the legal retirement age. Pilots were originally forced to retire by 60, leaving them with a 5-year gap before legal retirement. But as the retirement age for pilots was raised to 65 in 2011, Lufthansa says the scheme is no longer needed. Hungary's economic stats have greatly improved since 2012, but its foundations remain fragile, and a growing number of Hungarians continue to live in destitute. More in this report by Daniel Roth.
Thousands are gathered here on the streets of Budapest to support the current prime minister, who is hoping to be re-elected in the April 6th parliamentary elections. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and his Conservative Party are taking credit for what looks like an overall improvement to the economic situation.
I think the government is on the right track, and only Orbán can put the country back on track. The promises of the opposition lead nowhere. The opposition has indebted the country, and that's all.
Things look good on the surface. After a recession in 2012, the GDP started to rise with a growth rate of 1.2% in 2013, and the government is aiming for an increase of 2% this year. Public debt was more than 82% of GDP in 2012, which dropped to 77.8% in 2013. And the unemployment rate at 8.6% in late February has not been this low in 5 years. However, even if the numbers look good, the reality is far from it. The government has created millions of public works jobs, but they pay 162 euros a month, while the Hungarian minimum wage is 216 euros per month, and workers have no paid vacation and no sick leave.
Fidesz and the Orban system totally ruined the democracy in this country. I think like 3 million people is living in poverty now in Hungary. So I think it's crucial for us to change this government and bring back this country into democracy.
Hungary is still experiencing poverty, an abandoned private sector, and a lack of foreign investment. Even if the economic situation has improved, its foundations remain very fragile. Yet, according to the polls, the incumbent is expected to win with 50% of the vote in parliamentary elections this coming Sunday.
We're joined now by freelance reporter Batya Sharabi for a discussion on women in the Japanese economy in Feminomics. Batya, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
So understand, Japanese women, what are we talking about here?
Well, Shinzo Abe, Japan's prime minister, has a new initiative to try to encourage women into the workforce. Japanese women in general do not work.
Oh, okay.
So, Japan is facing a dilemma that they have a shrinking population in addition to low birth rates.
Right.
Now, this is partially due to Japan having encouraged women to stay at home and produce babies, thus more workers.
Right.
This
okay.
proved to be flawed.
No kidding.
They stayed at home and ate bonbons. Just kidding.
And watch soap operas.
Sorry, no, just kidding.
Okay.
So there's been a correlation to high birth rates with women who work.
Huh.
So let me just say this, Japanese women are highly educated, yet that potential goes unused.
Right. But isn't it also the situation that basically they're not it's not expected for them to work, or they're not welcome in the work environment? Is that true at all?
Partially. Women, there seems to be two problems in the workforce for women. One is problematic daycare. There's very long waiting lists. I think something ridiculous, like 400,000 people on a waiting list to get into daycare.
Right.
It's insane.
Okay.
Two is that they feel undervalued by their managers. They're passed over for promotions by men who are less qualified for them.
This seems very typical, no?
It's typical, and it's a no-brainer that they wouldn't want to work.
Okay, so but the fact that Shinzo Abe now is going to make a change, this is promising, yeah?
Yeah, it's promising. So he's pledged to open up, I think, 200,000 daycare centers. He's directing government ministries to hire more females. He's urging companies to have at least one female board director.
Oh, wow.
He is pushing for a 3-year maternity leave. He's pushing for government subsidies, retraining for these women to re-enter the workforce after they come back from their maternity leave.
So, I mean, would you say, like, obviously there was this recent report by the World Bank as well that's talking about empowering women, giving them more education, also mentioning the fact, stressing the fact that, when a woman has a job, it ends up reflecting on her household as well. More money tends to be spent by the house, by the household.
Exactly. She tends to spend the money on her children.
On her children, which then ultimately makes for, a better, brighter future, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I just want to say what's unfortunate for Japan, like I said, they're calling these their greatest hidden asset, is that overseas companies are recognizing the talent and snapping these women up in these female-friendly environments. So it's wonderful for Japanese women. It's unfortunate for Japan because, like I said, these women are the greatest asset. And I think
it's one of the ways in which basically Abenomics, if you want, essentially is trying to focus on getting the Japanese economy ahead.
Exactly. I think he's taking really bold steps in changing, the structural reforms in Japan. I think it's a great thing, and it could be a real game changer for Japan.
It seems to me like also it would basically change not just the situation for the individual woman, but also perhaps, in terms of the society, in terms of like cultural perspectives.
Definitely. I think if you empower
which could
women,
ultimately just have a much better impact on Japanese society.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Batya. Thanks for joining us,
Thank you so much.
giving us some more insight on women in the Japanese economy. Teff, a grain mostly grown in the Horn of Africa, is a key part of Ethiopia's heritage and a crucial food staple. It is now gaining increased interest abroad among health aficionados seeking a nutritious, gluten-free alternative to wheat, and farmers hope it can earn them some much-needed cash.
A herd of cattle circles atop a pile of golden teff, a wheat-like grain which has been cultivated in Ethiopia for centuries. Until recently, it was only known outside the country by visitors to Ethiopian restaurants. but as a nutritious alternative to wheat, it's now gaining increased interest abroad among health nuts, diabetics, and those suffering from gluten intolerance. For Ethiopians, teff is almost considered a part of the national identity.
These days, you could find some restaurants, Ethiopian dishes outside of Ethiopia in Europe or America. But it is our culture to consume teff from antiquities, and so we consider it as our cultural crop and cultural food.
Teff accounts for more than a quarter of cultivated land in Ethiopia. But with limited access to seed varieties, fertilizers, and modern machinery that would allow for higher yields, Ethiopia's 6.5 million teff farmers still struggle to meet local demand, let alone a growing international appetite. A ban on exports, meant to stop prices increasing beyond the means of those at home, has tied farmers to local consumers and stalled their potential to sell to foreign markets.
If we send teff to the other country, we can get a lot of money. But we give first for our country's consumption.
Regardless, this gluten-free cereal is being heralded as the next food craze, following the lead of other super starches like quinoa. In Ethiopia, teff is traditionally ground into flour and used to make a flatbread called injera, a staple of Ethiopian cuisine. Now, chefs abroad are finding new ways to use it, whether in veggie burgers or teff crepes.
Teff is not only gluten-free, which is an increasingly important aspect of foods that is being sought out, but it's also incredibly nutritious. And many people consider teff to be a superfood.
Though the international spotlight is now shining on a grain that has fed Ethiopians for millennia, unless the export ban is lifted, the country's farmers will remain unable to reap the economic benefits.
And now for a look at some of the less newsy items that you still need to know in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel, so I understand there's stories about fast food workers again?
Yes, so the LA Times has this story, the Fight for 15, this movement growing across the U.S. to get $15 minimum wage. Now, 90% of fast food workers in a survey reported that they're being denied breaks, being forced to do overtime without getting paid for it, things like this. In one survey, so McDonald's says, we employ 750,000 people in the world. You can't believe one survey. But this is 90% of people reporting this. Mind you, also Bloomberg's carrying this piece that two managers who are part of this movement, the Fight for 15, came out and said, yes, we did stuff like that. We denied people breaks.
And now they're out of a job.
And I believe they're out of jobs, yes. But they're kind of corroborating this, saying this was common practice from the head office. They told us to save money on wages.
Just so you know what goes into your burger.
Right.
Okay.
The BBC has a follow-up of what you were talking about earlier, Amazon with Fire TV, which, side note, Fire TV, it's come out from CNBC, FYRE is a pornography site on the internet, and it's called FYRE, is Fire TV.
Right.
So people are Googling this and finding both of them, and they don't know where to go. But so basically, the real news here, though, is that Amazon is jumping in with Apple and Google to try to get into our living rooms and to try to revolutionize how we watch TV, how we consume media, from video games to movies to communication in the living room.
Right.
So it will be. This is kind of like
it's taking over our lives, basically. They're dictating even more so how we should be entertaining ourselves.
Right, and this is it's a new day. You can think of these three companies almost as CBS, ABC, NBC.
100%.
These are the new media giants that are growing. The Guardian has this piece, apparently the same day that a major study came out about climate change, the latest major study, Exxon said, we read the study, we did our own studies, and we're not going to change our business plan. We're not going to stop selling fossil fuels. Now, both shareholders and activists together, shareholders of Exxon and activists together, are kind of saying, this is short-sighted. Obviously, you can't make money if everyone's dead. It's not that funny. It's like, when you say it, you're kind of like, oh my God, that's really harsh. But it's actually, this is kind of the view, it's kind of the long term versus the short term. And thinking of the long term versus the short term, BuzzFeed had this really, stark, chilling series of photos that we're going to see here. This empty malls from across the U.S., malls that in the height of U.S. economic strength in the 20th century were built, and that they've just been crashing down and kind of emptied out.
Yeah, geez. Okay, well, we're going to stay with these pictures for now. Thank you very much for watching, and join us again tomorrow in Benjamin Channel Fires. We love to have you here.